Welcome along to Friday Forum Live. Once again, we're broadcasting to you live and direct from Point Blank Music School here in East London, where today I'm joined in the studio by producer, engineer and the head of the school, JC, for a bit of a special show dedicated to the all-important backbone of electronic music, the kick drum. So JC's here to give us a bit of an insight into what makes a good kick drum, how to construct a good kick drum, and some of the do's and don'ts behind kick drum design. As always, the forum is also your chance to get involved. So all of you guys watching at home, make sure you post any questions you've got up in the chat room, in the comments section, and myself and JC will do our best to run through them all as we go and towards the end of the session as well. But just before we get into that, I've got to give you a quick rundown of what's been happening this week at Point Blank. So this week, first of all, we launched the Academy of Electronic Music, for which we've teamed up with Armada, DJ Mag and Google+. The Academy itself, it's your chance to get involved, to share your tracks with some of the other like-minded producers on the Academy. It's also your chance to get feedback from producers, DJs and some pretty big-name artists. Ultimately, the prize of the Academy is to get your track signed by Armada. So definitely worth getting involved. You can find out all the details on Point Blank Plus. Just head over to our magazine, you can check out all the info. Secondly, we have the full range of courses here at Point Blank London, getting underway in just over a week. It's the autumn term here at Point Blank and classes are very, very close to being full up. So if you are looking to come and study with us here in London, it's definitely advisable to get over to pointblanklondon.com and sign up as quick as you can. Only the last few spaces remaining. Also, the online classes are due to get underway this Monday, the 16th of September. Again, we are pretty full up, so if you are looking to study with us online, head over to pointblankonline.net and you can get enrolled now. So that's enough from me. JC, talk us through a little bit about what we're doing today and your experience of kick drums.
Well, I mean, basically the idea was we're doing a series about layering sound a little bit.
Yes.
So last week, Anthony took us some of his techniques.
We're looking at leads and bass.
Looking at bass sound, etc. So we're gonna go kind of using the same topic, but this time around on kick drum, and would carry on several series on layering sound in general. I think that's the idea.
Yeah, I think it's one of the kind of aspects that people can be a little bit intimidated about, slightly unsure.
Yes, and also maybe because people are using more and more, well, not more and more, but for people using libraries, usually there's less of a need for layering because the sound have already been kind of layered and processed in a way. So you're kind of so it's about understanding the kind of differences between maybe using a already made library and what you can do with it, what you can't, and also taking a little bit about the concept of layering sound in general, which I think, going back to what Anthony was discussing last week, it's quite similar across anything that you layer. You're looking at why are you doing it. So we're going to look at that really.
I think that's another thing for me is when to do it and when not to.
Exactly.
When to hold off.
Yeah, exactly. So there are several reasons why I think, and obviously on snare and drums in general, but kick and snare mostly. Layering
definitely.
sound is quite important, I think, for several reasons, and that which we're going to discuss. And
Yeah,
hopefully also answer a lot of questions.
Yeah.
The idea is really, we really want to try to make those sessions as interactive as possible. So
definitely.
I hope, please guys, ask any question that hopefully I'll be able to answer.
Yeah. Cool.
So, I mean, the main thing about layering sound, like we said, for me, there are three reasons why you're going to layer a kick drum. First of all, the usual thing is, let's have a listen. I've got a few sounds here, not those ones. I've got so many kick drum now put on this desktop that it's becoming.
I guess that's the other thing with kick drums. There's just an infinite amount.
Yeah,
of
exactly.
Stuff that you can use.
So I had some there into my kind of hip hop library. Here it is, hip hop kits. Here they are. So, for example, if you listen to those kicks, they're pretty severe, pretty heavy, as you can hear. And all those kicks, that's exactly the example for me. They've already been layered. They've already been processed. They're really big.
They're taking up a
There's
lot.
a lot of harmonics at the
exactly.
top. There's a lot at the bottom. So any stuff that you take, any kick drum that you're going to take from sample library of that nature, when you've got a massive range of frequency already in there, I wouldn't layer.
Yeah.
Because suddenly you're getting to a stage where there's just a bit too much, and it won't leave enough room to put the stuff across.
You need to get the rest of the track in there.
Exactly. So so the main thing for me is you layer your kick drums when they are a bit smaller. They don't have that kind of harmonic content going on. So the reason you tend to layer sound, and it comes from the recording technique, is usually you don't always get everything you want from one single sound. And it's the same if you record a live drum. So I've taken some pictures, for example. You see, for example, this kick drum here. Can you show my screen, for example? If you guys can see my screen. That's an example of recording technique for kick drums. You've got a mic inside, you've got a mic outside, and they're all going to give you different perspective.
Okay, and then you're putting the two together to get what you want.
Exactly. So it's all coming from that, and I always want to relate it to real physical way of recording, because effectively the techniques are the same, and the reasons we're doing it are the same. Here, the mic inside usually in the kick drums get you more attack, more of the beater against the skin. So it's the click. All important click that you need. And the more outside you go of a kick drum, the more bottom end you're getting. Now, when you record, there's also other techniques that you can do, such as those ones. If you can see it on this picture, have you noticed here that you've got a mic inside, slightly inside? Again, it's going to give you the kick, the beater.
Yep.
And you've got a speaker here.
Right.
We often use speakers to get the sub.
Okay. To
get the really low frequencies from the live drums that you can't get with a normal mic.
Right. Okay.
And on that sound, all you're going to get is imagine an 808 kind of sound, no top end, quite muffled.
Straight in the chest.
Exactly. Yeah. But the idea is that you bring them in together.
Right.
And you start mixing them together. Usually, if you get them right type of mic, one does your top end, the other one, there's no problem, there's no phasing, there's no conflict, because they complement each other really nicely. So that's that, and that's the same technique that you would do on a piano. If you look at a piano, you do the same. Small strings, that's your top end. Big string, the low end. And instead of trying to get it all with one mic, you've got a lot more control. And it's the same with an acoustic guitar. You see here, for example, on an acoustic guitar, often we use that technique. You get the body here, you get the strings, the neck, instead of trying to over EQ. So layering sound, that can really help you to do maybe less EQ as well, less processing, if you like. So I think that's one of the reasons. So you try to get those kind of the top end, the mid, the low, the sub, depending on the nature of the track, depending on the bass, depending on the style of the music.
I think we've already got a couple of questions about the the kick and the bass thing that we've talked about before.
It's the big thing that a lot of people are okay. I think we've got some technical issue potentially with our laptop. So we're carrying on.
Okay, I think we might have a slight technical issue, so bear with us, guys. We're just going to come back in just a sec. Hang on. Hello. Sorry about that, guys. Slight technical issue with the broadcast computer over there. But, you know, straight back into it. Thanks for bearing with us as well. I've seen your questions come through, so we're going to run through these. Just to give a heads up, guys, we've got questions about the EQ, the kick and the bass, the big one. You know, does come up a lot. Yeah. Something we have covered before, but of course, you know, more than happy to go into it again.
Absolutely.
Also, some questions around tuning the kick, which is a big one.
Yeah.
And also layering, you know, which we're obviously going to go into as well.
Of course, yeah.
So yeah, JC.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm going to start with probably layering.
Okay, let's do it.
So there's several reasons why, and several ways to layer track kick drums. So I'm going to first take you a very first example. Let's create a new one. So let's go into Logic, a new project. Here we are, and I'm going to take an EXS24 for the purpose of that. And I'm first going to listen to a few kick drums that I've got lots of kick drums here, basically. What is that one? So we've got some 909 here. Yeah, so for example, let's take one with a beta, more obvious ones. So I'm going to show you, I've got a kick drum instrument here done. So, layering, there's several ways you can do it. I mean, the best way people tend to, you can do it if you were doing just literally a sound design day. You could layer on audio here, and you could literally put them together, bounce.
That's what I tend to do, actually.
You can do that. It's totally valid, and maybe I should demonstrate that actually. So let's start with a couple of audio track, and we're gonna take some kick drums. I want more audio, actually. So audio number. Let's have 3, so we'll have some here, and I'm gonna take, I've got some top kick drums, for example. You see those ones are more, have the kind of attack on them, so we could have that one, for example, for a start. And then let's take some one with more kind of low-end type of vibe. One of those will do. Maybe a lower one. Yeah. Do we have a darker one, maybe? Yeah. Here we are. So we've got 2 kick drums here. And they are suitably different. So we're gonna, let's do that. I don't have my shortcut on this, unfortunately, so let's do that. So okay, so we've got 2 kick together. So we've got this one. So this one doing the low end. Yeah, this one is very much for the low end. And this one is for the top end. And then you can mix them together better. So the top end is going to be here, and you can, so that way, instead of going there and trying to maybe try to get some top end, some bite out of that kick, you see, it's not there.
No.
Maybe it's going to work in some tracks.
You're actually highlighting stuff that you don't really want to.
You don't exactly. You see what I mean? Whereas here, in a very natural way, all you do, bring a bit of attack, and you don't have to do it much. And you see, gradually I'm bringing it into the mix the way I want it.
When do you roll off the bottom end on the higher one? Or?
Well, for me, it depends. I've listened if there are phase issues.
Yeah.
That's the thing, you know. People always are kind of like, oh, you need to separate. Well, only separate if there are phase issue. And I'm going to demonstrate that as well. But here at the moment,
it sounds all right, doesn't it?
It doesn't seem like we're missing out on the... Let's put another EQ maybe here and see if we need to EQ the bottom end. So I'm going to put a filter on that one. So now what I've done is a bit cleaner.
Yeah, definitely.
You notice?
Yeah.
There's less frequencies.
Just like muddy.
It was a bit muddy in the low end,
exactly.
the low mid.
Yeah,
it was because the two kicks didn't quite work together. Sometimes they're going to work perfectly, sometimes they're not. So in that sense, if you wanted something a bit dirty, it could work having it like that.
Yeah. If you're looking for like a slightly more messy, lo-fi type of sound.
Exactly, it would totally work. If you want cleaner, then yes. And then suddenly you're getting totally the top end here. You see, it's really thin now.
Yeah.
And it really works together. The difference is. So that's the first approach: top, bottom end. And and yes, you're gonna EQ out maybe the bottom end of your top kick only if you need to. In this example, it wasn't that obvious that you did it. I think with layering sound, so that's one of the reasons you're doing it. As a mix engineer, I've received a lot of tracks where I would have 4 kick drums. 3 of them would be far too similar for me to have even a chance to use together. And maybe to illustrate that, we could, let's mute those 2 one. And I had identified a couple of kicks. I think those ones here. Let's look what they're doing here. Yeah, here they are. And have a listen now. If you listen, you've got one here and this one here. And they're very similar.
Yeah.
So effectively what you're, not only you're not doing much, but if you, I don't know how much we can listen, guys, online.
Yeah.
But
I guess if you've got good headphones on, you should be able to pick this up.
You're going to hear there's a lot of phase going on. There's a lot of phase going on
Just
between both
repeating
kicks.
the same sound.
You know, because there's too many frequencies going on that are together. I mean, let's have a look at the waveform maybe here. As you can see here, for example, typically you're going to have phase problem here. As you can see, you've got a positive audio form and negative here. So all those parts, you're going to have a lot of phase issue going on. So it's, you know, things to be aware of. So don't really avoid making kick have to be quite different. I think to work. So it's one of the reasons you're gonna have you're gonna layer kick drums to get that clicky definition and all that kind of stuff. Now, also what I'm noticing depending on the genre of music, the more busy the arrangement, such as a big trancy track or metal stuff, the kick are becoming more and more clicky. Because they need to go through that kind of wall of sound. Whereas maybe kind of more minimal hip hop, those genres, the kicks usually have less kick because they've got so much room anyway to be there.
They're more just riding sub sort of way.
Just enough attack to be there, but you don't have that kind of really clicky. I think on those kind of really big tracks with trance and metal and stuff, you really need that kind of like really clicky approach, like we've done, not on those, but on those 2 ones here, you know. And you could even have, you probably would have more depending on the nature.
Just
you
so
know.
it cuts
and on its own, it might feel like there's too much, but it would need to cut through the big wall. So that's the main thing to consider. That's an example of, that's your typical why you're going to layer sound. Now let's take another example. For example, I had a very simple hip hop beat here where I've layered the kick, and let's have a listen. What's important for me about layering sound as well is to get a certain density. So it's not only about getting the top, the bottom end, but it's also about just getting an interesting mixture of harmonics going on. You know, especially the barer the music is, the more bare the music is, I think the more you need to have just an interesting sound with it.
I think you're right. Like, you know, how many times can you hear the same kick drum?
And if you listen to, for example, maybe cleaner sound. So here I've got some. I had an MPC collection somewhere. MPC kick. So you see, I've got a collection of kick here. I've got loads. They're okay. But just a bit boring.
I'd agree.
They're single sound. You know, they're typical. It would be going back to the analogy of putting the mics. It would be the equivalent of like, that's your single mic, and you have not much going on. You know, so for that reason, this is when mixing sound getting a bit more characteristic, a bit more interest. So if you listen on this kind of simple hip hop beat, now I'm going to turn down one of the kick completely. the best way for that is probably actually, let's put it somewhere else. See? Typical example, it's a bit boring. It works. I've got a bit of attack. I've got a bit of bottom end. But apart from that, it's just a bit boring.
Like you just heard it before.
Exactly. And as soon as I bring that one, it's the one that has the crackles. So it brings a bit of interest to it. Now listen to it on its own. But again, on its own, it probably wouldn't work either.
It needs that layer, yeah.
And as soon as I bring the layer in the picture, it works a lot better, you know. Let's put that back how it was. And now I can dose. So I've got the other one still doing the bigger job, but then I've got the second one coming into the picture to make it more interesting. So that is more for tonal characteristic. You know. And you can do it, you can bring anything. I mean, you hear a lot of kick drum, they've got a bit of hi-hat on it.
Yeah, that's right. White noise or
white
something.
noises. And if you create, I've seen questions about people, if you create in the synth, how do you create that? You could go into creating maybe parallel distortion. And bring a bit of distortion. And again, your distortion, you bring the harmonics, again, the kick. And that's what's going to give you maybe an interesting...
Yeah, definitely.
So are there some questions that maybe we can...
We've actually got quite a few questions. I mean, the first one that's come through from a couple of people, 00 Beats, Thomas Strom also as well, have asked about the bass and the kick. I know it's something we have talked about before in terms of, you know, choosing appropriate kick for your bass or vice versa, and also side chaining is something we talked about before. So I guess layering might come into it if, you know, you have a very, you know, a bass line and your kick's not cutting through, you might want to put that top end on.
Exactly. Instead of EQing, trying to get it via compression.
And like we talked about before, rather than boosting.
Rather than boosting, just bring another sound that's going to do that, and I think you're getting a more natural sound probably. Definitely. I think it gives you a more pleasant. Now, in terms of bass against kick, it's always, I mean, basically what we say is one has to be, in terms of frequency range, one has to be below the other to kind of like. What you don't want is too much. I mean, each sound has an amplitude at a certain level. So let's put some new kick drum again here. Let's put some kicks. So we had a couple of kicks. Actually, let's do an instrument track here. There's some 909 kick here. So if you listen to that 909 kick here, for example, I'm putting it quickly on here, so it's going to be quicker. Let's have it here, let's have it here. On the right spot, yes, and on the right spot. Okay, let's have that. So now you've got a kick here. Is it? It's probably not lined up properly. Yeah, it is. So we've got a kick here, so let's look at this frequency content a little bit, maybe to analyze that. So you see here, each sound has its kind of what I call their fundamental frequency, where it has the most amplitude. And it's all about amplitude when you work with bass against drums. People have an idea that if you have lots of 100 hertz, when you've got a kick at mostly predominantly at 50 hertz, for example, you can't have a bass at 50. Well, you can, but it's just after that the harmonics, you need to consider all the harmonics around it. So if you look at the kick here, fundamental is around that spot here, so it's about 75 around here. So, and it's about here in terms of level. So that means you still have margin to bring a sound with bass sound that goes into there. when the sound are a bit higher, bass and kick can play together in the same area.
Yeah.
The problems arise when you start having too much 60 and below sub together.
Okay.
That's when the problem arrives in terms of phase and really flapping, a flappy bass. So in terms of the sub, you're going to have to have a choice. You're going to have to have a choice, make a choice about what's doing my sub.
Okay.
But there still can be, people have this perception, I think, that fatness is only 60 hertz and above that it's not really bass, but bass is actually up to 150.
Yeah, definitely.
You know, so you can have stuff covering there, and between your 60 and 150, you've got those margin, this area where you can fit both. So yes, you can have a fat bass and a fat kick.
Yeah.
You just have to be careful that, again, the phase don't clash together.
And 60 hertz, below 60 hertz is when we're talking. You can,
yeah, that's when it could start become a bit of a problem potentially, I suppose. But if we were taking, let's take an ES1 very quickly here. There must be some bass sound in there, surely. Deep bass. Yeah, so we've got a bass sound here. So you see, you're still. They still can play together, and they're both fat.
Yeah.
So you still can. It's really depending on where the rest of the harmonics and how the rest of the sounds fit together.
Definitely.
I think that's really the key for me.
Okay, cool. So let me try and run through these because we've got quite a few going up. So someone else has asked, Dave has asked about, in Logic, how would you transpose audio to tune a kick drum to the key?
I tend to, for me, when you need to tune your kick drum, when there's a lot of resonance to the kick. If the kick is really dry, let's take this example of kick drums that I had somewhere. I've got a lot of kicks here, yeah. Okay. Those kicks, when they're when there's not too much resonance, it's okay.
Yeah.
It's a kick that has resonance that you need to consider the tuning of it. I mean, obviously you always can tune them, but tuning a kick in the key is not always that obvious when there's no resonance to the key, to the kick drum. If the kick is really what I call matte, such as, what is that one? Yeah, that one, for example. You're still going to tune it in terms of, but it's more in order to get you maybe a bit more fatness, a bit more, it sounds very different to kick. And I tend to kick them, to tune them into the XS24 or whatever sampler that I use. Normally I would tune it in my sampler. But kicks that had more resonance, I mean, typically the 808 and stuff like that, obviously. Those ones, they're the one that you really need to tune to the tune, because there clearly is a pitch. Some kick drums have more of a pitch than others. The one with the pitch, the more pitch you can hear from the kick, the more you've got to be very, very careful about the tuning with the rest of the track.
Just beat driven.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
Cool.
Do you have any other questions?
We do indeed. Sai has asked, how would you process a kick drum that you make in a soft synth? So I guess if you're designing a kick drum, how would you process that? He's talked about saturation, EQ, compression, etc.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, depending what you're aiming to do.
It just depends on your track and also what you're looking to achieve with the
exactly
kick.
What kind of kick are you? What you're trying to achieve? If you need a bit more often kick drum that you may design within. With synthesis, tend to be maybe a bit soft and lack a bit of harmonics and character, but at the same time they're original. And I think that's really the key for me in terms of layer. Why you should layer your kick or design them yourself is that we're getting to the stage where everybody's got the same bank of sound, sound library. So a lot of there's a satisfaction. It's part of the production process. I think that's for me is the key. So, yes, you would probably a bit of saturation on kick drums always work well.
Definitely.
And we can have a look. For example, let's take that one. Let's go back into our Logic project here. Let's add one sample. Let's load sample in there. desktop, kick drums, here we are. Let's have that one. And let's have it, for example, here on C3. Here we are. Yeah. So here we've got a kind of 808 type of sound. So, for example, if you wanted to process that a little bit straight away by putting compression, that's going to help to tighten up.
Yep.
And maybe getting some attack to it as well. But also slight distortion, such as Big Crusher, for example, in Logic or Overdrive, can give you some interesting. So you see straight away the harmonics that we've created.
I tend to like bust the distortion.
Yeah, well. You can do it as well. It really depends on the effects.
Yeah,
depend on the effects. Yeah. Parallel processing or both work in that, but straight away it's more interesting.
Yeah, definitely.
You know, straight away it's.
And it just adds that extra harmonics and extra weight and.
Straight away that can become. I quite like those kind of sounds.
Yeah, me too.
A bit more a bit more attitude to it.
Yeah, definitely. We've also got a question. Reed Messi has asked how a kick decay can affect with the synth and the sidechain.
Yes.
I guess talking about
Yes. Well, I mean, basically, that's what I was saying. Almost with the pitch as well. The more decay a kick has, usually the more pitch you can hear.
Yeah.
So it can really interfere. It can really interfere. So if you want something again really tight, to tighten up your kick drums, you can play with the envelope a little bit of your kick. What you can do as well is compression. Compression is really, a lot of people are gonna, we've got this usual thing about here, for example. Let's take maybe a fatter kick for that example here. I'm gonna mute that example. I'm gonna mute here my. Yeah, so let's do a bit of layering of sound again. Let's go back to that. So we've got this sound, for example, and I want to maybe put some top to it. So here I've got it here, and I've got to go there. So I'm going to make it, the sound I want to double is on E. Yeah, so that's that. So we're going to put that one on here. So now I've got two. Now they're out of pitch because of that. Okay. What you notice as well, an important aspect of layering sound is the attack, making sure everything is lined up again.
Yeah. Otherwise you're going to get some
on snare, it can work on snare, having flam
and claps as well.
Claps and all that kind of stuff works really great. Again, depending on the nature of what you want to do.
Yeah.
With kick drums, I'm speaking for myself, but in my opinion, it never works. It's got to be tight. The attack's got to be really, really tight. I can't think of an example of when you can get away with not being tight, really, if I'm honest. So here, as you can hear, we've got a problem. They don't layer really well at all. So what we need to do is look at the culprits. One of them is probably, and if you look at this kick here, it's a bit clustered, my screen now. If you look at the screen here, this kick doesn't start at the beginning, there's a bit of noise. If you're using it on its own, it's probably okay. But if you're not, you see now it's much tighter. You see, not working. So again, play it by ear. What works for you? You may want to keep a bit of that in front, it's okay. And you see, the more I'm getting closer, the tighter it feels in terms of. And even we talked about the decay here. Now we could go with the short decay. So now it's a lot tighter. We could go there and shape it a little bit, So
I guess so. The other thing there is not to be afraid to go into the sample and cut it down and
definitely
make it fit.
Definitely.
Okay, cool. So, Soundation EDM Promotion have asked, What's the best way to make a hard kick for dubstep that has a nice, that is nice and punchy? So I guess
a layering, a technique of a.
I mean, the
mix.
first one we even looked at was a fairly decent example. I guess. So I guess in dubstep you're looking for quite a powerful kick, but you've got a really big bass line.
Exactly. So you may have, something like that.
Yeah.
That one would work pretty nicely, for example.
Yeah, definitely.
So let's go into Logic here and let's create one on the spot. So go to this zone. I'm gonna go there. I'm gonna go there. So we're on D3. So now I'm gonna load the sample, and it's one of those, I think, is it? Yeah. I mean, both of them, this one works as well. It's got nice, lovely attack to it. But let's do it more with like that kind of. So we're getting that one to start with. Let's not pitch it. So we've got that. And then after that, we could try some of those others. Let's load a new zone. Let's do it here, D3 as well. And let's load another sample. Let's see what could mix up with it really nicely. Yeah, so you could have that, for example, to have a bit of noise, or a bit of that for the attack. So straight away, now we've got. So straight away, you've got a mixture.
Yeah.
And then you could have another one as well if you wanted to.
Sounds good though, yeah.
Straight away, it sounds pretty, And then obviously you're gonna dose.
And then you've got to look at your bass line, etc.
And you're going to dose how much of the attack you want. And, with dubstep, I think, again, to get that kind of attitude, you're probably going to need some kicks with a lot of harmonic in there.
Yeah,
some
I think,
noisy stuff.
that with the slightly gritty topper end is going to work pretty well.
And maybe one in the middle in there to get more attitude, a little bit more grit into it.
Definitely.
And then having that kind of sub, mid, top kind of thing.
Cool.
I hope it's answering the question.
I think so, yeah. Thomas Strom has asked another question referencing Afrojack about how the kicks sound so clicky and punchy but still in balance with the rest of the mix. I guess when you're using a kind of, quite a clicky kick, is there issues with the rest of the kind of stuff going on?
Depending, the clicks can happen again. Depending where the synth, it could be.
I think that EDM, stuff does have quite a high, quite high kind of clicky kick seems to come through.
Yeah. But I don't think it clashes with anything else if it's again put in balance, which is again going back to why you would layer. Like we were doing in one of our examples where we had two different ones. You can just dose how much click you need. And then if you need to EQ the click, you could even filter it a little bit just to get the click in the right place.
I think as well something, with that kind of EDM stuff in mind is the white noise thing. I think that's something I've heard, definitely.
Yeah, definitely as well.
Layering up with a bit of noise.
I mean, the key is really, with most kick, especially with low sound like bass as well, is to be able to, it has to work on big speakers, and I would say those ones are far too small. I always get frustrated working at home, and if I don't work in a big studio with big speakers, I never feel confident about my kick drum. It's only if I go to a club or when I used to mix, the kick drums I would always work on the big speakers, quite loud, just to get really the full picture.
Especially with club music, the fact is I can make stuff at home, and then if I go to the club and put it on a system, it sounds, especially kicking the bass.
Totally, and especially because you don't hear the bottom end so much, and you discover it when you play it somewhere.
Exactly.
But for safety, I think a lot of people, and I hear a lot of and read a lot of advice like cut everything below 30 and all this kind of stuff, and it's kind of like, well, you don't necessarily have to do it. It's just that we tend to do it at home now because we don't hear below that, so we just want to make sure that there's nothing. And it's true that if there's too much sub content, then it's a bit of a wasted energy. You don't want too much, but you need a little bit, because that's what makes you feel comfy and a
little bit sick.
Exactly.
As we're kind of approaching sort of time, let's try and run through a couple of these. So Palo has asked, is it important to tune your kick with your bass line? Again,
depends how much pitching characteristic there is in the kick.
Depends on the kick,
But usually you're gonna kick it,
I guess it's using your ears, isn't it?
It's using your ear because your bass is moving anyway. If there's kind of a chord progression and several notes in the bass, you know, in the part, the bass is moving. So the kick has to work across all those notes.
Yeah.
Which is why on very musical stuff, when there's quite musical bass line, you tend not to have a long 808, for example.
Yeah, definitely.
You know, if you have a long 808, there's going to be one or two notes where there's going to be a bit of a clash.
And probably the kick's going to be the dominant force anyway.
Exactly, exactly. If you notice, like the track with really fat 808 kicks, the kind of like the one we've played, some of them we've played, then usually they don't have a very big bass line going across.
Definitely. Yeah.
And that really is.
You've got to make a choice.
Yeah,
Cool. We've Jason Quinn has asked how much reverb is best to be added for a kick.
Well, I wanted
to
yes, and I wanted to go through that again about.
Because I have to say, I use reverb sometimes on kicks, especially if I'm looking to get like an older, like 909, kind of like old school warehouse sort of vibe to it.
Well, I mean, the idea of layering again, what it allows you to do. Let's carry on doing a little bit of an example to finish off. Let's try to do more example if we can. So let's do that. I'm gonna check some other kick drum that could go well with that. 909. What do we have here? Yeah, that actually could work. Let's do that. Let's have that. With that. With that. With that. Okay. Without my shortcut, I'm a bit lost, I'm afraid. So again, here, let's... You see, there's some slight problem with those.
Yeah.
It doesn't seem to be quite working, those two kick together. Let's see why, the reason... Why could that be? Yeah, you see there's a lot of phasing going on. So those two kick drums, we can safely say they're not really working together.
And when that's happening, is it best to ditch it and try
ditch
sounds?
it. Yeah, exactly, exactly.
Right. Don't waste your energy,
no,
I guess.
No, don't. Absolutely not. Let's go with 808 type of vibe. Yeah, let's take that one instead, see how that works. I mean, I'm doing it really, really rough and...
It's cool.
Why is everything off the grid on this Logic 10? What's happening here? Are we on one? No, we're not. Why? Let's have it. Let's do a better job, still. Yeah, let's have it on the grid properly. That's it. Now that one. One. Okay, here we are. So we've got a couple of kicks now. As well, something you can hear, because I've cut the 808, we could try to make it a little bit longer. So that's better. So you see now they kind of work not better together, those two, I feel. We've got an 808 doing your bottom end, and that's doing your... But that could be a bit tighter, for example. So the 808 could be a bit tighter here. So we could go fade. Yeah. Why is it? Yeah. So you could do that, for example. So straight away it's a bit tighter. You know, it's a bit tighter straight away by doing that. But you're getting all your bottom end here, the fatness here, and then you're getting the kind of attack here. Now, if you wanted as well to make it a bit better, I probably would. Where's the 909? Yeah. On the 909, you could even maybe.
It's got a nice feel to it, yeah.
So now it's
slightly rugged, like.
So it kind of works nicely now. And if you wanted to add, let's say, more of a top end kick for the reverb, basically with the reverb, I tend to put it on the top end of the kick rather than on the bottom end.
Yeah, of course, yeah,
not to have that kind of stuff. So again, it's a nice thing to have layering kick because you don't put it on your bottom end.
Yeah. I think also if you have, for me personally, if I have some reverb working on the other parts of the drums, sometimes it's nice to bust the kick. It feels like it's in the same place.
Yeah, exactly.
You feel like you're in the same room, sort of thing.
Yeah, totally. So you see, for example,
even if it just is that top layer of
yeah,
the kick.
exactly. I mean, for example, you could, if you had, let's say, if you had that one on top now. I mean, for me, the problem now is they're a bit all over the place. All they don't have a clean attack. So I would probably go in there and start working.
Tighten them up.
Yeah.
We're kind of approaching time, JC.
Okay.
Just for you guys at home, I've just seen a kind of flurry of questions come in. Very, very quickly, we are going to be going through your questions, myself and JC, on the YouTube channel. So we will go through the comments and we'll try and do our best to answer them. I mean, just to run through a couple of things that I've seen come through. Someone's asked about, is it okay to use distortion on a kick? Of course.
Yes.
You know, for me personally, I always distort kicks.
Absolutely.
We've also, someone's asked a little bit about EQing a single kick drum. They find that to be the most annoying part. Yeah.
Well, that's where for me the layering comes into the picture.
Yeah, exactly. I think Matt said that, you know, he finds that when he boosts a kick, it sounds horrible. When he cuts it, it makes it sound dull. You know, layering is the exact answer to your issue.
Yeah, I think so. And don't over EQ. The problem with I used to try to over EQ my kick drums to get what I wanted and realize quickly it's kind of like, look, if it's not there, the EQ is not going to bring it back. There may be some 50 hertz content, but it may not be the 50 hertz content that you want to hear. Yeah. Which is where you're bringing the layering into the picture.
Layering and selection of sound. If it's really not working, ditch it and try something else. You know?
Also, when I'm seeing a lot of people when they start a track, they start straight away spending hours on finding the right kick. My advice would be like, because you don't know what's the bass line's going to be. You don't know what the rest of it's going to be. So use a kick drum that is decent enough to get you inspired, and then
I think
work on the tuning of the production after the writing. I think makes sense.
I think today lots of people mix as they go, and sometimes it's like just get something down, get it down, and then think about the next bit. So for ease of workflow and for you guys writing, if you're starting out, the best thing to do is try and write it. Very, very quickly. Lots of stuff about EQing the kick and the bass, something which we have gone through in the past, I think, as well.
I think we'll take next time. I'll prep a couple of projects maybe to illustrate maybe this whole EQing bass and.
Cool. Well, it looks like
kick. And also I wanted to add something maybe on the 909 type of sound.
Yeah.
Stuff like that. When you've got sounds like those ones, I find it's something I always had a problem when I used to work in a studio on an SSL board where. By default, I used to compress every single channel. I noticed that when you compress an SSL sound like that, usually doesn't quite work really well. If you put a compressor straight on it,
or straight on the kick.
Yeah, somehow it doesn't always work. Very rarely. You see, straight away you can get not enough attack, or it creates too much attack. You see, So for me, the key on those is to parallel compression.
Yeah.
And I think that's why a lot of the dance guy from New York back in the 90s used to use, where most of it was done with 909s.
The 909 drum.
Parallel compression works a lot better, and as a group, rather than, unless you want that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Also, just to finish as well quickly, I tend to use compressor a lot on the kick drum as a first point, of course. If the bottom end is a bit loose, a bit too woolly and a bit too wild, putting a compressor does amazing result. It tightens up your bottom end. That means you may not have to take it off by EQ. You're actually you're actually controlling it. It's fun. Sometimes for me it sounds a bit fatter and a bit more nice to have it really, it's there, but it's really compressed and tight.
Compression just brings it all in.
Yeah, instead of removing those 60 hertz or whatever you're removing from your kick. So something you may want to...
So you might try and just put the compression on first before you start EQing?
Big time.
Yeah.
And that's usually why you tend to compress first anyway.
Right.
Because you can compress certain, and actually you suddenly realize I don't need to EQ it the same way I thought I would.
So I've kept all of that energy there.
Under control.
Yeah,
but it's more under control.
So very nice point to end on, I think. Definitely. Something that I don't think I was too aware of anyway. So yeah, as I said, guys, for you watching at home, we are definitely going to be running through this comments. There's a lot, still coming through. So, myself and JC will definitely go through that. Keep your questions coming. I see there's quite a lot of healthy discussion between you guys as well. So keep that up. And of course, keep locked to the YouTube channel. Keep locked to our Facebook page, Point Blank Plus as well. And of course, we'll be here next week, same time, Friday, 4 o'clock. For the next edition of Friday Forum Live. So thanks for watching and thanks to JC.
Thanks guys.
And we'll see you next week. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.